I had been looking forward to this vacation for months. A week of relaxation, sun, and sand on the beautiful beaches of Florida. My family and I rented a beach house and spent the first few days enjoying the warm weather and exploring the nearby attractions. But on the fourth day, things took a turn for the worse. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me and my little sister alone in the house. We were watching TV when we heard a loud banging on the front door. I paused the show and listened closely, but didn't hear anything else. I assumed it was just some kids playing a prank and decided to ignore it. A few minutes later, the banging started up again, louder this time. I hesitated, but then decided to go check it out. I opened the door to find a man standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. He asked if he could come in and use our phone, claiming that his car had broken down a few miles away and he needed to call for help. I didn't want to be rude, so I let him in. He seemed grateful and quickly made his way to the phone. But as he dialed, I noticed something strange about him. His eyes were darting around the room, and he kept glancing at me and my sister with a creepy smile. I started to feel uneasy, but tried to brush it off. My sister went to her room to play, and I stayed in the living room, watching the stranger. He finished his call and then turned to face me. "Thanks again for letting me in," he said, his smile widening. "You two seem like such sweet girls." I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about his tone was off, too friendly, too insincere. "Is there anything else we can do to help?" I asked, trying to be polite. "Well, actually," he said, taking a step closer to me, "I was wondering if you could do me one more favor." I could feel my heart racing. I didn't like where this was going. "I have a friend who lives a few miles away," he continued. "I was supposed to meet him tonight, but since my car broke down, I can't make it. Do you think you could drive me over there? It won't take long, I promise." I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I don't think that's a good idea. It's getting late, and my parents wouldn't want me driving alone with a stranger." The man's smile faltered. "Oh, I understand," he said. "But I really need to get there tonight. Is there anything I can do to convince you?" At that moment, my sister came back into the room. The man's eyes flicked to her, and then back to me. His smile returned, wider and more sinister than ever. "Well, how about this?" he said, reaching into his pocket. "I have something for both of you, a little gift, to show my appreciation for your kindness." He pulled out two small, wrapped packages and held them out to us. I hesitated, but my sister eagerly took hers and started to unwrap it. As she did, I could feel the man's eyes on me, watching for my reaction. But before I could even see what was inside, the front door burst open. My parents came rushing in, looking frantic. "Get away from him!" my dad yelled, lunging towards the man. "That's the guy the police are looking for. He's been breaking into houses all over town." My mom grabbed my sister and pulled her towards the door, and my dad along with 3 police officers tackled the guy. The man we had let into the house had been wanted for multiple murders in the surrounding towns. He had been on the run for weeks, and the police had been unable to track him down. My family and I were in shock. We had come so close to danger without even realizing it. My mom grabbed my sister and pulled her towards the safety, tears streaming down her face. The police confiscated the packages, so we never got to know what was inside, but I can only imagine the horrors. This whole incident was just so terrifying and made me so paranoid. Now I am always extremely careful when interacting with strangers, and I never let them into my house. It was the height of summer, and I had decided to take a break from the hustle and bustle of the city by spending a few days camping in the wilderness. I was an experienced camper, and had been on many trips before, so I thought nothing of it when I packed my gear and headed out into the woods. The first day was perfect. I hiked through the woods, set up my campsite, and cooked myself a delicious dinner over an open fire. As the sun set, I sat by the fire, enjoying the sounds of the forest and the peaceful solitude. But as the night wore on, I began to hear strange noises in the darkness. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the trees, but then I heard something else. It was a low growling sound, like an animal in distress. I tried to ignore it and went to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. I tossed and turned, but sleep was elusive. Then, just as I was drifting off, I heard a loud crash outside my tent. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and grabbed my flashlight. I cautiously opened the tent flap and shone the light outside. That's when I saw it. A large, dark shape was moving towards me in the darkness. My heart racing, I reached for my camping knife and prepared to defend myself. But as the shape drew closer, I could see that it was not an animal. It was a person, dressed in ragged clothes and stumbling towards me. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then the person started to moan, and I realized that they were injured. I cautiously approached and saw that they had deep cuts on their arms and legs, and blood was seeping through their clothes. Without hesitation, I grabbed my first aid kit and started to treat their wounds. The person was delirious and could barely speak, but they kept repeating the same phrase over and over again. They're coming for us all. I tried to calm them down, but the more I spoke, the more panicked they became. Eventually, they passed out, and I was left alone in the dark with my thoughts. Since it was late, I decided to try and go to sleep. When I woke up, the man was gone, so I decided to hike out of the woods to get help, since I was thinking that the man could have wandered and gotten lost. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I turned around, there was no one there, but I felt a sense of dread settling over me. Finally, I stumbled across a small cabin in the woods. It looked abandoned, but I had no other options. I cautiously approached the door and knocked. To my surprise, it opened with a creak. Inside, I found a bizarre scene. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and there were candles burning on a table in the center of the room. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this was not just an abandoned cabin. It was a place of dark rituals and unspeakable acts. Suddenly, I heard a sound behind me. I turned to see a group of people, dressed in robes and carrying weapons, advancing towards me. I tried to run, but I was surrounded. They grabbed me and dragged me to the center of the room, where a terrifying ritual was about to take place. I don't remember much after that. The details are hazy and unclear, but I do know that I barely escaped with my life. I ran through the woods, not stopping until I reached civilization and could call for help. To this day, I don't know what happened in those woods, but I know that I will never forget the feeling of terror that I experienced that summer. It was a beautiful summer day when I decided to take a hike in the woods. I grabbed my backpack, a bottle of water, and my phone, and headed out. The sun was shining brightly and the birds were singing. I was looking forward to enjoying the day in nature. As I walked deeper into the woods, the temperature began to rise. The shade from the trees helped, but I could feel the sweat on my back. I took a sip of water and continued on. I knew there was a beautiful lake ahead and I couldn't wait to take a dip and cool off. As I approached the lake, I noticed something strange. The water was a murky green and there was a foul smell in the air. I hesitated for a moment but decided to take a closer look. I crept closer to the edge of the lake and peered into the water. That's when I saw them. Hundreds of dead fish floating on the surface. It was a horrific sight, and the stench was overwhelming. I quickly backed away from the lake and decided to continue my hike. As I walked deeper into the woods, I noticed that the trees were becoming more dense and the sounds of birds and animals were fading away. It was as if the forest was becoming more and more silent as I moved forward. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a low growl, coming from somewhere behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. The growling continued, getting louder and more menacing. I tried to move forward, but my feet were rooted to the spot. That's when I saw it. A pair of glowing red eyes, staring at me from the darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine and my heart racing in my chest. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my backpack bouncing on my back. I could hear the growling getting louder and closer, but I didn't dare look back. As I ran, I stumbled and fell, landing hard on the ground. I quickly scrambled to my feet and continued running, but I knew it was too late. I could feel hot breath on the back of my neck, and a growling voice whispered in my ear, "You shouldn't have come here." I turned around to face my attacker, but there was no one there. I was alone in the woods, with the sound of my own terrified breathing echoing in my ears. I stumbled forward, my heart pounding in my chest, and eventually made it back to my car. To this day, I don't know what it was that chased me in the woods that day, but I do know that I will never forget the feeling of terror that I experienced that summer afternoon in the woods.